Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Himes here with Bob Stewart. Bob, how are you doing today?
Chad, I'm fantastic. We're going to talk about talent. I love it. I love talent.
I know you love talent. And Bob, I know the reason we built the whole episode of the talent series. Well, it was for you. We talked about it, right? I've thrown you under the bus enough on that. We are here talking about talent. Now, Bob, we've already done a full overview. We talked about finding talent. We talked about the 2 steps of the hiring process of talent. We've talked about how to launch talent properly. Today, what are we going to talk about?
Chad, today we're gonna talk to a number of individuals about how they coach talent up in their careers in the past. And we're actually going to ask them all kind of a similar question, right? Yep. What is that specific question we're going to ask them, Chad?
We're going to be asking all these wonderful people, Bob, what's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up the talent in your world? Because we want to hear from some people who are hands-on leading people to help our audience out there. So folks, make sure that you're taking notes on this. We're going to go quickly through a whole bunch of people and bring you a whole bunch of opportunities to learn from. But also make sure you've joined us in our Facebook group, right? Facebook.com/group/win-make-give. Bob, they can always find us there so that we can have follow-up conversation and we can ask you to share with us in our Facebook group what's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up talent in your
Chad, they can't always find us there. They can find you there at like 5 a.m. and they can find Ben and I there at like midnight, right? And generally in the middle, we're kind of all there, but
that's an excellent point. There's usually someone around. We might not all be there at the same time. All right. So, Bob, you've been in leadership positions. You've been in management opportunities. Let me ask you the question. What's been the most effective strategy for you, Bob Stewart, to coach up the talent in your world?
I think of 2 things, Chad. The first, and these aren't really even, there's some ongoing component to them, but the first thing that I would say is that when you have a talented individual, you should give them the opportunity to make decisions that matter.
Okay,
right?
Tell me more.
Well, you have to empower them. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they have to feel empowered to go and take the talent they have and actually apply it in your business. And if you have somebody that's, they're always looking over their shoulder and wondering man, am I going to get in trouble for doing this? Or, Ben's a big proponent in our business. We ask for forgiveness, not permission necessarily, right?
Yep.
When we hire somebody into our world, we're confident that they're going to live by our values, make decisions that we would agree with. And so, look, sometimes that doesn't always happen, right? But we want them to be empowered to go out and make decisions. Talent needs to be unbridled from, that always having to look over their shoulder. So that would be the first thing I would say.
Okay. And Bob, you said in there a really powerful statement that Ben always says, which was?
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Right. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. Folks, that's what Bob and I did today. We are asking for forgiveness, not permission. We didn't say, hey, Ben, we want to record this episode where we're going to go interview a whole bunch of people. That's why you're not even going to hear from Ben Kinney on this episode. Don't worry. We will hear from Ben Kinney on coaching up talent as well. But we're asking for forgiveness, Ben, that we went and grabbed a whole bunch of people when you listen to this episode.
But that's one of the reasons you and I could go out and do what we do is because we don't feel like Ben's always looking over our shoulder or we've got to be checking in the rearview mirror to be like, hey, are we in trouble for that thing? So that'd be the first thing.
Because one of us is talent. We won't discuss which one, but one of us we know is talent.
we both know that. But so empowering that talent would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, when I have somebody working for me or working with me or partnering with me, I really like to show them how I think about them to other people. And here's what I mean by that. A lot of times in our world, people will reach out to me when they need something, but I'm like, I can't do this, but Zach can do this or Kyle can do this, right? I'm going to have them help this person. And I know Zach and Kyle are both talent. So when I make that introduction from that person who needs something from me to Zach, every time I'll say something like, hey, Zach's my main guy. He's my go-to. If I know the answer, I know Zach knows the answer, right? So Zach's going to be the one that helps you. He's going to reach out to you. But I want to make sure Zach sees that, right? So I'll, I'll introduce him in an email or a text thread or something. I'll say, hey, I want to introduce you to Zach. He's amazing. He's our guy here. I go to him for all my personal things. Like, I want to build him up in the eyes of our customers. So first off, they go, oh, I got a piece of talent here. I got Zach. He's going to help me. Awesome. But I also want Zach to know that's how I think of Zach. Right.
Yeah. What a great way to power them up. Yeah, that's a great way to coach those people up. It's not even directly you having to do the work to Zach of coaching him up, but when he sees you putting him up on this pedestal, boy, he's going to step up to being that person.
That's right. And look, in maybe this is just in our world. I don't know, Chad, because I don't operate in any other world, but we have a lot of talented individuals that they need that confidence instilled in them. They need to know that everybody else thinks they're talented, right? Because they might even be unsure of it. Like, oh, do I know enough? Do I have the right people skills? So when you show them that, hey, I believe in you, I believe that builds their self-confidence up and that unleashes their talent even more.
Wow, that's a great one.
So those would be my two things. What have you done, Chad? You've led plenty of people in your life. What has been, a strategy that you've found effective?
Bob, I'll tell you, Ben actually mentioned my favorite strategy on the Launching Talent episode. And anybody whose talent that I've had the chance to work with, they know the answer to this, which is why they sometimes don't come to me. It's because it's always going to be hold them to accountability. Right? That's how I believe you coach up talent, because talent's going to show up. Talent wants the accountability. Right? Kobe Bryant wanted other players to show up and practice hard with him. Michael Jordan wanted those other players to show up early because it made him show up earlier, right? They want that accountability. I want someone that wants to go work out with me or run with me because it's going to make me want to do it better and step up to the talent I have. My phone probably blows up between the hour of 6 and 7 o'clock at night because that's everybody who I'm having the pleasure of leading reporting their accountability for the day, because if they're talent, they're not hiding from the numbers, they're stepping into it. So to me, Bob, the most effective strategy I've ever had is dialing it down to one or two simple numbers or a tool that we're using that I can hold them accountable to reporting on every single day.
Love that.
Right?
That's good.
Ben talked about it when we were talking about launching talent, how he would say, look, I'm going to ask you to text me at the end of every day what it was you learned. I just keep that going even after they've launched as talent into coaching them up. All right. So awesome. Bob, you've shared something. You shared two. I've shared something. We've got a lot of other people who we want to go to. We want to ask them this exact same question. We're going to take them through that, ask the question, ask for a little follow-up through it. And then, of course, you and I will come back and take away our ahas from all this conversation. At the end of all this, folks, help us. We're just asking for forgiveness if this one doesn't work. Ben Kinney is part of the Talent Series. We'll be hearing from him shortly. So let's keep this moving. Jump into our first interview opportunity. All right, Bob, now we've got David joining us. He's the president of a major tech company. And David leads lots of people on a regular basis. So, David, I want to put to you the question we have put to others, and that is, what's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up the talent in your world?
Well, I work for a very growth-minded company. We don't believe in annual reviews. We just move way too fast for that. So you might have heard this from other folks, but we talk about weekly priorities pretty religiously. We align those priorities along the company goals, and more importantly, we work to execute. I think the trap that maybe I've fallen into as a leader is maybe trying too hard to find a solution first for people. So, have you guys read the book Fierce Conversations? Susan
Love
Scott.
It. Fantastic book. Great program I've gone to, the training on it. Great recommendation.
So you probably know 100 times more about this than you've probably forgotten more than I'll ever know, right? But the framework that she puts up around things like, hey, what's the most important thing we should be talking about today? What's happening? Digging in, right? My boss teaches all the time, trust but verify, right? Dig in, inspect what you expect. I love her questions around, hey, if nothing changes here, what's the implication for you? And things like, asking questions like, hey, what part of this are you responsible for? Right. Looking to see if they understand the issue, do they embrace change, that kind of stuff. So I've been really practicing some of that after reading this book. And I've read this book twice, actually, and trying to do a better job of when I get in the room with someone, I don't jump to solution. I just stay in question mode with them as long as I possibly can. And then at the very end, she says things like, can I offer some suggestions? Right. But I try really hard to not offer suggestions early on. That's probably the most important thing I've done with coaching on people is just listen more, ask more questions, stay in question mode, stay curious about it. Right.
I know Bob's about to ask you a follow-up question, David, but I just love that statement you just gave. It wasn't jump to conclusions. It was jump to solutions. Because boy, how often do we do that? What a great, powerful takeaway right there. Bob, I know you got a follow-up question for Dave on
that. If you are somebody, and I think a lot of leaders are naturally the type that we want to jump to solutions, right? We're like, here, let me just solve this for you, get you out of my way, and because I got work to do. How do you make that shift, right? Because you said you were somebody that was a solution, you're going to jump to a solution. How do you make that shift towards being a better question asker? Or is it just, I just decide when the next person that walks in my office, I'm not going to give it a solution. I'm just going to ask them a bunch of questions. Is it that easy? Or,
for me, it kind of was. And honestly, if anyone's worked with me, knows me, they know that I'm a consummate. I write on boards, I write on white papers, I'm always writing down notes, and it's just kind of the way my brain works. I just sort of whiteboard stuff out. So for me personally, my cheat sheet was, I would just write it on a piece of paper. I had my questions listed, and I would not allow myself to offer any suggestion until I had went through Susan Scott's 8 or 10 questions that she does, right? I just kept driving. And the amount of insight I got from people, I mean, we've made some massive changes in the organization just because we forced ourselves to stop, ask questions, don't get into solution mode. Here's another important one my boss does a lot. Get a commitment from action, get a commitment of action from those folks. What are you committing to doing here by when? What are those actions going to be? Right.
So they've come into your
question,
sure.
Right? It's still
they've walked into your office. They have something that they need your help with solving. Ultimately, instead of a solution, you're going to slow down and say, "All right, let's ask some questions here to try to get to what is the real problem. Do they really understand it? What have they done so far to try to solve it?" Right? Like there's a series of questions that you're going to ask, and hopefully through that there's some discovery of what the solution may be.
Yeah.
Right. Now you get to the end and maybe there's not an obvious solution. So now you might say, "Hey, can I make a suggestion? This is how I might approach it now that we've kind of flushed out what it is." And then at the end, it's like, okay, as you leave here, what are you committing to do and by when? So that we kind of figure out either what's the next step or how do we get to the end of this problem or
one of the best versions of this I've seen is actually Ben Kinney. He'll do things like he'll get in a room. He doesn't have a list of questions. He just looks at you and says, "What do you want to talk about today?" And then he shuts up. He just sits there and lets the air.
And whatever my problem or issue, or it's going to come out. I mean,
it comes out.
Here you go.
Right? He just shuts up. And and the other thing, if he gets to the end of something, it's really funny. It's masterful. But if he doesn't have a solution, or doesn't really want to offer a solution, or how he is, sometimes he wants you to arrive at it yourself. He'll say, "Can I think about this overnight for you?" Good luck getting back with him, by the way, 24 hours later. He's on to the next thing, right? Right. But so, well, those are a couple things that I think he does. He's just made it part of the way he moves through the world. And so I've tried to mimic that, frankly. Right? Rip off and duplicate till you can figure it out. But anyway, that's probably the best. That's the best piece of advice I would share would be stay in question mode.
Love it. What a powerful way to coach up talent around you. David, thanks for sharing with us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right, Bob, we've got Chris Stewart, who's the president of Place. So this is a guy who's moved his way up to becoming president of a major organization, and he's had some great opportunities in the past. I know we're going to get some great answers from Chris. So Chris, welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. And let me ask you this. What's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up the talent in your world?
Yeah, thanks, Chad, to you and Bob. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think two things. First of all, as a leader, you've got to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. That's the first prerequisite of being a great coach and coaching up talent is you got to have something to offer. Here's point number two. And, I would suspect that on these podcasts, there's a lot of overlapping responses, right? So I'm trying to bring something that maybe people aren't talking about. But here's point number two. If I've got something to offer, which is the requisite point number one, then point number two is the ability to be confrontational. And I'll give you a twist on this. I like
this already. I like whatever you're going to say already. Go.
Yeah, I like the term carefrontational, right? So it's not confront just to be an asshole. So you've got to exhibit compassion and empathy. Those are two different words. Compassion and empathy for the purpose of helping people get better. I think a lot of times leaders, they seek the easy path, the road most traveled, which is, not to get into the weeds, not to get into the sticky, but you've got to be prepared to tell people to check their ego at the door. You got to be prepared to tell people, to address the ugly truths of why people aren't exceeding their true potential rather.
Wow,
Chris, that's amazing. Yeah. You're the second person in my life that has used the word carefrontational. I heard it once. A coach that I used to have, you got me talking about the term carefrontational. I think that is such a powerful term, and I'm glad you're bringing it back into the forefront. Talk just a little bit more about that. Be carefrontational with somebody for us. What does that sound like?
Yeah, so I think obviously it's just a function of the situation, who you're dealing with. I'll tell you, early on in my career, I had an opportunity to lead leaders early in my career. So I was at the time probably in my late 20s, and I was building out an organization organically. We were just hiring friends, hiring family, and how that goes when you're an early stage startup, and that's a pretty typical path. But I can remember this conversation I was having with a new leader who was leading early on in our work together. And I asked him this question in my annual review with him. And I said, who do you think's more important to the organization, me or you? And he said, I was. He responded that I was. And I said, who do you think's more important, you or this particular person on his team who I knew that he was having some challenges with, but I don't think that he knew that I knew that. And he said that he was more important than this person on the team. And then I said, who do you think is more important in our organization? This person on the team who I just referenced, let's call her Jill, or our receptionist, Sarah? And he said, Jill. And I said, so I've identified a problem that I think speaks to the root of the challenges that you're having as a new leader in your career. And that is that you have this power structure completely flipped upside down. See, I'm the least important person in our organization. And I was referring to myself as the chief revenue officer at the time. You are the second least important. The person that you're having some challenges with is the third least important. The most important person is that receptionist. Why? Because she is the greeter. She is the chief experience officer of all new clients when they enter our world. We were a direct response-based advertising company where all of our new prospective companies called our front desk before that was their first experience, right? So we called her our chief experience officer. And so that was an opportunity for me. And that was a friend. That was a personal friend of mine. But that was an opportunity as his leader. And he was a new leader leading people. For an opportunity just to expose some flaws in his thinking, to be okay with that, to not let our friendship get in the way of just addressing, just kind of his ego and the way that he thought about traditional management structures. So there's many more, examples that I could share, but I'm just sharing that as something that comes to mind since you asked me, Chad.
Chris, because I think like some people just naturally have, from their upbringing or what, are willing to be confrontational, and some people are not. I think so does a leader have to be willing to be confrontational? And if yes, which I think you're basically saying yes, because you think this is an important skill, how do I develop that? If I'm not just naturally somebody that's willing to be confrontational, like, is there something I can do to develop that?
Yeah, I guess it's a wonderful question. I think maybe to soften this, you don't necessarily have to be confrontational, but I think you need to exhibit the social awareness, right? That emotional intelligence to understand or to anticipate or to have an intuition as to what's happening or what might not be wrong. You need to be able to read their body language, their tonality in a situation, and just be able to at least point out, hey, is something wrong? Or is everything okay? And at least just be able to do that. And then I would say the second piece of it is, if I always come, Bob, from a perspective of my whole personal mission is to help those around me exceed their potential. Like that, I'm looking to pour into other people to help them exceed their potential. So if I can always come from that perspective, then that's where that care piece comes in. So in other words, this conversation that I had that I use an example, I wasn't trying to beat the guy up. I was just trying to say, I know you're trying to be a great leader because I see you're working your tail off. I'm just saying, if you don't recognize that when you're going in trying to deal with some issues that people on your team are having or creating, if you're going in as their quote unquote boss, not going in there to pour into them and help them address whatever they're challenged with, you're coming at it from the wrong perspective. So go in there from the spirit of service, not from the spirit of boss or authority.
I love it. So it is confrontation. Like you're not confronting them because, like you said, you want to beat them up. Like you're fronting them. Is that even a word? You're carefronting them because you want to help them just be better, reach their potential.
Bob, it's we need to take a little bit of you. You care about people very, very much. You care about that. Me, I'm the confrontational one. I'm happy to get in your face. We need to kind of merge ourselves, maybe Wonder Twin powers here, and mix it. Now, Chris, you gave us two things, which was fantastic. We asked for one. You gave us two. I just want you to take a moment or two. You said the first thing was work on yourself, right? Because you have to have something to offer.
Yeah.
Give me something you do to work on yourself, or share a tip with our audience that they could take away right now so they could work on themselves so they have something to offer.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I love that, Chad. I mean, I think, it's all a function of your role, right? So if you're in the audience and you're listening to this, you got to really think about, what is your role in your organization? Are you the CEO? Are you an individual contributor? Are you a person tasked with, being the glue for a real estate team as like a director of operations? So you got to think a little bit about, what is my role today, but what does my future look like, right? What do I want to be as I evolve, and where do I want to contribute and show up? And I think the other thing too is, where do I have a lot of passion? I mean, for me, I've always viewed myself professionally as a leader. And I think that comes from my upbringing, my role in my friend circle growing up, my role athletically in the competitive sports I've played. So I've always looked at myself as trying to be very well-rounded. Work on my communication, work on my presentation, work on my organizational skills, work on my writing skills, which means that I've spent a lot of time throughout my entire professional life surrounding myself by people that have poured into me to help elevate those skills. Now, if I might take a scenario from an audience member, maybe you're looking to, you're a team lead and you're looking to grow your team, and you're saying, well, I need to develop a better skill of recruiting and attracting talent. Well, if you work on that skill, now you've got something to offer as you're talking to that talent and you're trying to identify, what do they want to do, right? So I'm trying to attract new agents to my team. If I'm working on myself, my skill as a great recruiter and attractor of talent, now that will show up in terms of adding value to the people that I'm looking to attract, because you're not going to land everyone that you want to recruit into your team. And if you pour into people and help them achieve their goals, irrespective of the goals that you're trying to achieve, you're going to attract more talent. So that would be, and I could go on, right? Most people are very poor communicators. Why? Because they don't listen. So develop a better skill for listening. You will become a better communicator by result. When you listen and communicate better, you will be able to add that value to everyone that you come into contact with. Trust me, everyone can communicate more effectively. If most people on this listening to this call right now, if they would just focus on being better communicators by virtue of being better listeners, which means they're better they ask better questions, they will have a great skill set to pour into others. So just, a few examples.
Chris, I love that better listener, because like And you said you can develop that skill. Like Ben, he's the Sharpie and the single piece of paper, and he's taking notes, and that's not something he's always done. That's something he did to slow himself down, so he was forced to listen to that person because he had to write down what they were saying. I'm sitting here taking notes. The audience can't see us. We can see each other, but I'm sitting here taking notes as I've written down better listener and ability to be confrontational and confrontational. And so that's making me a better listener because I got to sit here and write it down. So even small things like that can impact our ability in this case to be a better listener.
All right. So Chris, even if the audience doesn't take the tips you're sharing on how to coach up the people in their world, the audience should appreciate everything you've just shared, because Bob will obviously be better on future episodes because he's going to finally start listening to what Ben and I have been saying in the conversation. Chris, we appreciate you taking the time and sharing with our audience something that they can do to coach people up.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. So we've got Savannah, who's the director of support for a major tech company. And Savannah, Bob and I want to ask you the same question we're asking everybody in our talent series coaching talent episode. And that is, what's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up the talent in your world?
I would definitely say instilling a sense of ownership in my team. That really shows up in all aspects of the job, taking ownership of the customer issue at hand, taking responsibility and ownership for the company policies and changes, and really being able to talk to our customers and internally like they own the business and they run the business. And I think that also, I try to lead by example with that ownership as well. It's really important for me when my team has successes and wins that I'm allowing them to take those and the spotlight's on them. But if my team or someone on my team doesn't necessarily do an ideal job, I take ownership of that and I try to reflect or deflect that away from that person. Because if the rule in our team is we're always trying our best with the information that we have. And so if you're always trying your best with the information that you have and something happens, that's probably something that I did or didn't do.
Right. You were responsible for getting them that information they were missing. Mm-hmm. that would have allowed them to potentially do a better job. So really what you're saying there is we give them all the wins and we take on all of their losses, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Bob, haven't we heard Ben say that so many times? And even he won't say it. We just give him credit for it, of course.
Yeah, you give away the credit, you take the blame.
Right. So what you're saying, Savannah, is the number one thing that you do to coach them up to being even better is you give them ownership from start to finish on a project so they really feel that they're into it, and it's going to coach them up to become even better at what they do because they own that project and know it's on them, and they know they're going to own the reward that comes along with it.
Exactly. And that could even be mentoring another team member or helping with the success and the growth of another person on the team. That helps them become a leader, involving them in interviews or other aspects of the business that might not be a part of what their, quote, duties are in that specific role.
Go back for me to a second on that idea of ownership, Savannah, because I love that. I love, Chad, that relates in some way to mine is kind of getting us off their shoulders so they're not feeling like they have to look over their shoulder all the time. But like that ownership idea, I think of the book Extreme Ownership, right? Like that ownership idea. Can you give me an example of when somebody wouldn't kind of own that thing versus when they would? Like, what is that? How does that practically play out in your world when man, Zach owns that, like he owned that issue and he got it all the way through? What does that look like?
So, a good example would be a major product issue we might be having. It's really easy to point the blame or assume that someone else is going to be handling it, and to just ask, like, what can I do? What is needed of me? Who's got that? I have this, and kind of just coordinating and communicating with everyone. And just, I think just encouraging that conversation, the communication, and then just really inserting yourself where you see there might be a hole. And I think that not only helps with moving things along faster, but it also helps to gain new skills because you are willing to offer your hand at something you might not even have done before or have any previous knowledge in doing prior to that.
Yeah. You know where this comes to life for me is like, and Savannah, I know this happens to you, I'm assuming sometimes as well. Sometimes our people that maybe we need to coach up a little bit more, they'll come to us and ask us a question. We're like, I don't know the answer. I'm like, I don't know the answer. And then I think like, well, how would I find the answer? And then I think, well, couldn't they have had that same thought process, right? So sometimes it's just like, the talented individual, they're not going to come to you and say, well, how do I, and if they do, it's going to be because they exhausted all of the different ways they could ever think of to get that answer, right? And now they're like, look, I'm at a dead end. And sometimes you're at a dead end too. And you're like, all right, well, let's sit down together and think about how we could do this. But that extreme ownership person, they're not coming to you for every answer, right? They're coming to you when they've exhausted their ability to find the answer.
Yeah. And part of that coaching for those people that are coming to you with questions and not finding the answer themselves is to remind them that every time you talk, like, I'm happy to help you out with this. I'm always here for you, but like, let's talk about the ways that you can find this out yourself, or, kind of just gentle reminders that way too, because it's a habit that you have to learn, I think, for those people that don't have that naturally.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, Savannah, take ownership. Thank you for your input on our talent series. Bob, we are going to talk to Josiah. Now, Josiah is the creative director for another major company that's out there. We've gone and found some great people to talk to. Josiah, welcome to the Win, Make, Give Talent Series. We want to ask you the question that we've been asking, which is, what's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up the talent in your world?
Hi, well, thanks for having me. And I think the most effective strategy, there's a couple different approaches that I've taken, but I think it really comes down to prioritization and accountability. So what I mean by that is when somebody joins, it's my job to tell them, here's what the role entails. But I also really try to look for people who are going to do more than that are going to go above and beyond, right? The people who are looking for, how can I improve upon things, and how can I take what's there and make it better, and how can we be better than the next company over and beat the competition, right? So, when we hire someone, we're looking for that really self-accountable person who's going to be motivated and who's going to communicate clearly and who's going to reach out when they have a problem and keep me in the loop so that I know things are going well and they're going well too. But to coach them into productivity and greatness and improving more, what we do is on our team, we have daily meetings where we have a stand-up in the morning and we have a stand-up document. And every day we're talking about what are priorities? What's the most important thing that we could get done today that'll move the ball forward? And then if you finish that, what's the next thing 2, thing 3, thing 4, right? And when we meet in the morning, we start and we say, here's what I'm grateful for. Here's what I'm doing today. And it's our opportunity to say, is the number one thing really the number one thing right now? And we also operate from this concept of prioritization throughout the organization, where it's not just daily, it's also weekly and monthly goals, right? So my job as a leader is to make sure that what everybody is working on today lines up, and is the summation of all the different pieces for our daily goal as a company, a weekly goal as a company, or monthly goal as a company, right? Communicating clearly while people are working on stuff and giving constructive feedback and high-fiving people and saying great job when they reach those goals, and if they aren't, reevaluating them and saying, well, what's causing you to not reach those goals? And if you aren't finishing your number one thing every day, maybe it really isn't the most important thing. So what is the actual most important thing?
Josiah, let me ask a question around that. So that the first thing you said is, or one of the first things you said was, we like to make sure people are working from a sense of priority, but we also want people that are going to go above and beyond and look at some of the processes that you have and make them better. How do you balance that? Like, hey, everybody, it's like you've got priority 1, and if you get that done, 2 and 3, where do you give them the time, or how do they find the time then to work on the processes in the business, not just on the things that need to get done?
Yeah, I think part of that is I really like that Google concept that they had of their 20% time thing where they can work on whatever project they want, So I think time blocking is crucial, where most of the day you're working on the most important thing. But maybe reserve an hour or two every day to work on moving the ball forward, to thinking, how do we zoom out and how do we improve a process? I have a recent example. There's a member of my team who reached out to me the other week and said, hey, I think it would be really beneficial, I lead a team of designers and creative people, if we had more of a design system where we had all these components in one place where everybody could just draw from them. And instead of having to recreate it or find it in different files, we just had it in one place. What do you think about that being on my priorities list for the week? And I said, that's an amazing idea. We've needed that for a long time. We had one, but it's outdated. We need to update it. You own that. That's on your list now. So that's not their number one priority, but it's part of the weekly plan, where when I expect, when we meet up next week, we also have a weekly one-on-one, by the way. I'm going to say, how'd your week go? What did you get done? And what's the plan for next week? That's on the list. And I'm expecting to hear progress. Now, it doesn't have to be finished, but they said, I'm volunteering for it. I agreed. Yes, that's important. So let's see how we move that forward.
I like that. So they have the autonomy to bring an idea up, and then you work that into their priorities.
Yes.
That way we know that it doesn't fall off the radar. It's something you guys talk about in your daily stand-up or your weekly one-on-ones. That's good.
Yeah.
I love what we hear from Josiah here. We're hearing he's doing a lot of things in there, Bob, right? He's having those one-on-one meetings. He's having that daily stand-up meeting with his people. He's giving them the opportunity to take on a project. He's coming up with saying, hey, find an hour every day where you get to just be creative. But all of that came down to the priority of the thing that Josiah talked about, which is making sure his people know their priority, because they're going to get better at what they do if they can truly prioritize instead of getting stuck in the weeds doing all that stuff. So Love that one, Josiah. What a great tip for our audience to remember as you're coaching your people up. We appreciate you sharing that with the Win, Make, Give audience.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Bob. This time, I'm bringing on my co-host from the 15-Point Plan, Jolene Snell. Now, Jolene is so much more than just that, yet Jolene is a leader of people, okay? She's an executive at Place, and I wanted to ask her this same question. So, Jolene, for the Win, Make, Give Talent Series, we want to know from you, what's been the most effective strategy for you to coach up talent in your world?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And this is such a powerful question. So I'm honored to be asked the question. And I think, first of all, in my own leadership journey, it started with hiring people, working with people years and years ago, and having the experience of failure, right? Doing things, learning, and failing my way forward. And that's where my leadership journey began, to be able to truly coach up people in my world so that I had the most tools and experience to back that up, right? So I think that's where it all starts. And the second thing I would say is that we have to lead ourselves first. And so, like many years ago, I didn't have the same leadership talents and abilities that I have today. But what I could do is I could lead myself first. And Ben talks about that in his leadership triangle. The very base of the triangle is leading yourself first. And so anything that you would ever look to someone else to do, to encourage them to grow in a certain area or be something in their job role, is for you to demonstrate that first. And that's the one thing that I had the ability to control and do. So I'd go and I'd focus on first, like showing up, being present, asking great questions, and just being there and being present, knowing that that was the basis of the triangle. And I got to expand on that later by really like knowing that I had to continue to increase my knowledge and ability so that every single day I could bring new value to the people around me. So my learning and my leadership, even after all of those years of failure and failing forward and getting to where I am today, that's not what was going to take me to the next level. And watching like Ben on stage, of course, and listening to the Win, Make, Give podcast and other inspirational books and podcasts and recordings, like all of that stuff was knowledge that I was picking up and then saying, how can I use that to bring value to my people today? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. We have this, Ben, and you've, I'm sure, come across this theory of Ben's or this feeling of his that like when we're at work, we like do our job. And when we leave work, we develop ourselves. Like, so are you like, just in terms of the time that you get to spend doing that kind of, listening to the podcast and reading the books, and most of that's happening outside of your job, right? Like your job, you have things that need to get done in your day every day as you show up to do your job. That does most of that kind of development of yourself happen kind of on your time?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like when you're building a business, you have a lot of chaos that's happening in your day and it's all consuming. And there are times though, when I have to say, hey, Bob, like I need to schedule some time for learning in the middle of the day because I might not have it at the end of the day because I've got to get home to my kids and make sure that I'm present for my kids and my family. Okay. And so I do think that there's times when I've had to time block that right in the middle of the day. But I know if I don't put it in the schedule, like, hey, if I don't go for a walk and listen to that podcast at noon and it's on my calendar, that it won't get done. But there's other little hacks for leadership growth. And that would be such as you're getting ready in the morning, listen to the podcast, listen to it as you're driving down the road. Audible, of course, is like the book on tape, right? And I think that there's ways that even the busiest of either, parents, people in their jobs, business builders, entrepreneurs, that they are still able to feed their brain every day with value that they can bring to others by following some of these little life hacks and just find what works for them. So what works for me doesn't work for everyone.
Only if you set out to do it, right? Like
setting out to do it.
You have to make it a priority. You have to sometimes even block it on your calendar in the middle of the day. But like you are intentionally going out and saying, I can't lead these people any better tomorrow than I led them today unless I know something more, right? Or I've learned something else.
Yeah. And here's the thing about that key piece there is that sometimes I'll read a really great article and I'll say like, I could actually bring this and I could speak on it at the morning meeting or at the next training event or whatever. And sometimes I'll just take that article and I'll text it to Chad or I'll text it to an employee or someone I work with. And I'll say, wow, this really inspired me to do better in this area of my life. So it's almost like I'm coming from this place of humility because, I mean, truly in my role, I feel like I'm the CEO and I'm the janitor. So I don't have a lot of ego attached to these types of things that I do. So the things that inspire me or that I learned today, I want to share that with someone else. It could be as simple as like an Instagram quote, right? But then I'm thinking of someone specifically who I know that would benefit, and I send it to them as if it benefited me just as much.
I get those shared messages all the time. So Jolene, what I'm hearing from you is earn that learn check mark on the 15-point plan every day.
Heck yeah. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. I think it just takes focus. I mean, you see people on webinars and they're multitasking. Well, like they're multitasking because they feel like they need to get something done. But what that's doing is that's taking away from them being able to, like, for lack of a better phrase, like earn that check mark, to be able to get that knowledge for that day if they would simply just focus on what they're doing in that moment.
And if you want to know what Jolene was talking about, go check out 15-Point Plan podcast. Jolene, thanks for sharing with everybody some effective strategies for coaching people up around you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Bob, just you and me again. And wow, what an opportunity to go through a whole bunch of great leaders and asking them that question. So we heard things from you starting this whole thing off with empowering people. We heard about leading ourselves first and making sure we had something to offer. We heard some great things from some great people in there. Bob, what's the takeaway you're going to walk away from this episode with?
I mean, many of these are takeaways for me. I think the one that really stuck out to me, and one of the reasons And I've gotten a chance to work with Chris Stewart just a little bit. This guy gives language to things that like make them resonate for me. So what? Carefrontational?
Carefrontational. Yes.
Carefrontational. I love that term, right? Like, and maybe one of the reasons it resonated for me is because I am definitely I'm not a confrontational. I don't like confrontation. I hide from it most of the time. But for me, like that, reframing it as carefrontational, right? It's like I'm approaching you because I care, right? And I see that you I believe you could be something more than you're displaying right now. And so let's figure out how we help you get to that place. I just thought that was a really great kind of framing of what he originally had said, which is you have to be willing to be confrontational, right? But what he really means, you have to be willing to see these things coming up in your world and lean into them to help people. And it's not really confrontation, it's carefrontation. I just thought that was really, really, really good stuff.
Yeah, it was a powerful message. Love that he shared that. We heard in there, of course, more than once, work on yourself. So everybody out there, we hope you're working on yourself each and every day so that you have something to bring to the people.
They're listening to our podcast. They're at least that step down the road.
There
right?
You go. You got that one, Bob, right? We heard taking ownership. Having people take ownership, giving them ownership. We heard you talking about empowering people to make those decisions. Almost the same thing. Powerful statement. We heard prioritization being important. We heard accountability in there. And one of the great ones, ask great questions and come from contribution and curiosity really is a great way to coach those up around you.
David's comment about not just offering them the solution right away. I thought that was really smart too, right? Because you don't end up coaching them up. You just give them an answer and send them on their way. I'm impressed by some of the folks we got to talk to, and those were some really good answers.
And we hope that you're enjoying the Talent Series. We hope you've been listening to all the episodes so far. We have a great one coming next, because if you want to know how to coach up talent, we're going to talk to one of the top coaches out there about that opportunity. So make sure you come back for the next episode of the Win, Make, Give Talent Series. Also, make sure you're joining us in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/win-make-give, where we're talking about this stuff. And we want to hear your number one tip to coach people up in the world around you. Until our next episode, on behalf of Bob, myself, and Ben, we just went without you, Ben, and we ask for forgiveness. Remember, do good.